Can we go on now to the disabilities issue? And again, the Premier's signed up to this in effect, in principle, but of course the argument is still ahead of them on whether they'll contribute anything at all. A couple of the Premiers said on the way that they couldn't do. They just simply couldn't afford to down the track. But before the meeting got underway, Tony Abbott gave that news conference and offered this to the government.
The scheme has to be the property of the whole nation, rather than that of any particular political party. It needs to be a reform that's owned by the Parliament, not by any individual. The National Disability Insurance Scheme is an idea whose time has come. It has to be done responsibly, but it does have to be done. The Coalition will do whatever we reasonably can to make it happen as soon as possible, and would accept a government invitation to be jointly responsible for this vital national project.
Well, we're here getting it done. Latika.
So she gave it very short shrift, did she? You know, half a dozen words and moved on. Should she have given some consideration to a joint effort?
Yeah, I wonder whether the two of them are talking at cross purposes at the moment. I always see the glass half full in these sorts of matters. Yes, well, I sit in the centre here, so I see when Labor are talking to business, I see that the two of them are trying to get along. I see when Tony Abbott wants to talk up a bipartisan reform, he means it, and I do know he cares about the NDIS. And I've been flapping my arms, and the one and only time you had me in that chair, in the right-wing chair, to call on him to do it, and good on him for making the offer. Maybe there's a bit of suspicion between the two of them. Maybe what Gillard worries about, and Christopher Pyne actually gave us a little clue there, that maybe the coalition game is that the thing doesn't start until after the next election, so it doesn't actually become a co-owned thing, but a coalition landslide policy, and then people promptly forget who offered the policy.
But the whole government mantra is that Tony Abbott's negative, his doctor knows. So if you're going to cooperate with him, you've got to get rid of that mantra. So I don't think the government wants to get into that area, because it would knock back one of their attack themes.
But you'd still take the opportunity with him on this one.
Well, you may, but it doesn't mean that the Prime Minister would. I mean,
but is partly the coalition's problem with Tony Abbott saying it shouldn't rush this thing, and you shouldn't rush anything, but they want to. The government wants to introduce trials before the next election in the middle of next year. Is the concern for the coalition that they'll get some sort of political advantage out of this before the election?
Yeah, I think that is a concern.
And so then why would they want to give co-ownership to the coalition?
Well,
it's
yes,
just politics,
so that
isn't
it could become... It is politics in that sense, so it could become, you know, an election campaign issue in that sense. But, you know, it was interesting, wasn't it? I think it's a really good thing that the coalition have come to this point and are offering to embrace it. But there is that caveat about the timing. I think Tony Abbott's right, you don't want to rush things, but I think it seems to take an inordinate amount of time these days to build stuff. If you look back, I remember having a conversation once with John Deeble, the guy that, you know, helped design Medicare, and he said, look, that process actually took basically a year from when they designed a system from scratch, you know, went through green paper, white paper processes and got some legislation into a parliament. This is a 7-year process. Surely there is some room to actually accelerate a bit, particularly when Tony Abbott also made the really good point in his speech that he said, look, you know, he cited one carer and a woman who said, look, you know, she's sick and tired of politicians who are all sympathy and not much practical help. Well, you know, why not try and deliver the practical help sooner rather than later?
It was an impressive... I don't know whether you saw it live, Jared, but I thought it was a really impressive presentation, but it was all lost. Because the Bob Brown resignation followed up on it.
No, I thought it was a very impressive presentation, but I think also Tony Abbott is concerned about... The theory is that he's not, but as I understand, he is sort of concerned about revenue and how some projects are going to be paid for if he gets into office, and doesn't want to make irresponsible promises, because I think the lesson of recent Australian political history is don't make promises that you can't implement or that you abandon or whatever. But I think when you talk to Tony Abbott privately, he's very concerned about this. And to give credit to Bill Shorten, I mean, he's done a great job in driving this forward when he wasn't as senior in the government as he now is, and getting it to where they are. And I think Bill Shorten's got a point when he says that the states already have some cost in this area, so there's a good reason for the states to cooperate, because they're already covering some of the costs in the disability area.
Yeah. Barry, one important point here which neither Gillard nor Abbott want to touch on at the moment, because this is where the debate gets difficult, is the choice you have to make. There are a lot of good spending initiatives out there now, and that do pass the first smell test of cost benefit, but the budget is in chronic deficit, not just the federal budget but the state budgets, because revenue's gone from here to here and the revenue isn't coming back. Now, if Abbott and Gillard could sit down just this once and actually work out what could fund this thing and make an announcement that they would co-own whatever it is that funds this thing, whether it's and the states might be sort of dragged into this unwillingly, but dragged into it with say a broadening of the payroll tax levy. I'm thinking off the top of my head here, so don't go quoting me on the payroll tax thing, but something that will pay for this thing so it's not an issue for the budget bottom line. Then I think we're on the reform page.
Good, and it won't happen, George, but nice thinking.
Still trying to talk the place up.